Hey guys, welcome to the Break the Chain podcast. I'm here today with Zowie-Sky. Zowie is the founder of a movement called Surrender to Change. Surrender to Change helps people with addictions and be free from mental health problems. She uses her own experience to help other people get through challenging times. So, in today's podcast, she talks about her being raised by a mother who was a heroin addict, growing up in really hostile environments. She talks about her own addiction and her own battles with mental health. So, enjoy. Welcome to the podcast today, Zoe. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, you grew up in a way that most of us just couldn't even relate to. I mean, I've read your story, and reading it is just like, oh my God. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about your childhood?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it was horrific, and I can think back on it now, and I can think like it never ever happened because it was just so abnormal. So I am from Melbourne, and I grew up in Melbourne Commission, which is low income housing. The environment that I grew up in was surrounded around addiction and crime, prostitution, and it was just hell. It was just like if you could ever imagine like hell on earth, that was where I lived growing up. Yeah, so a lot of things happened to me as a child that, no child should ever experience. I mean, I had my first I'd seen my first crime scene when I think I was about 5, where a murder was committed in our local playground, which was in the middle of our commission block over a custody battle. And, the raids were normal. The police were always around our block of flats. And, growing up in that lifestyle, you see and you have things happen that just shouldn't happen. So for me, I experienced a lot of neglect, a lot of abuse on all levels, whether it was emotional, psychological, sexual abuse, physical abuse, and that was just the norm. So it's really horrific to think about now because, my life is so different and I have children of my own and they don't live that life today. And it's a really hard thing to think about as well, how to talk about. But, I get a lot of empowerment talking about it today because, I think that a lot of people out there may be able to relate. Growing up in Australian Commission, it's hard. So, I don't really know what else to say about that. It's, I don't really think about it. And so, and I don't really get an opportunity to talk much about it today. I talk about my addiction and all that stuff, but I don't actually get a chance to talk about where it all began because I think it played such a huge part in my story, the beginning of where it all kicked off.
What I think's nice is from the relatability point of view, because there's a lot of people who will be feeling like I'm the only person in the world who's having this much of a shit time. And that's kind of like, it makes you feel like that because, when you're depressed and you just get shut into darkness and you just feel like you're on your own. So you do feel like it's only you. I've read through your story a few times in depth. And one thing that I wanted to talk about, because obviously your mum was an addict, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was, yeah.
And she was using heroin, which is kind of it's as heavy as you get, isn't it? It's like there's nothing more that makes you less aware of your surroundings. And I just wonder what that was like, sort of trying to, whether you remember what it was like trying to relate to your mum at the time, because it seems like at that time in your life that you're trying to find boundaries and understand what's right or wrong. One of my parents is kind of like quite unstable in mood, like really quite unstable. So it was always quite kind of hard to you do something and try and figure out whether it's right or wrong, but you never get the same response twice, and it's quite confusing. Did you find that you had the same experience?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's hard to understand addiction as a child, but I think that I had quite a lot of awareness because it was usual for me to, say walk into my lounge room and my mum would be slumped over. Like that was just the norm. But trying to connect with her on emotional level, well, there was really no such thing, that nobody was there. It was me. I had to look after myself. And so, it's hard to create a relationship with somebody who's, there one minute and not there the other because, I spent a lot of time in and out of foster care. So trying to learn what a healthy relationship was, well, it just didn't exist, and being able to connect with my mum just didn't happen. And, I think as a child, I really thought that it was me, that she wasn't around because I had done something wrong or, I went to foster care because I was naughty when it wasn't the case. She couldn't look after herself, let alone, another child. And once my sister left, well, that's when, child protection kicked in. So I think it's like a parent can be there present, but not present. She might have physically been there, but emotionally and on every other level, she just wasn't there. So I found it really hard to understand. And even growing up as a teenager, when I became a teenager, I rebelled, and I absolutely despised her because I thought, why wouldn't she love me? What did I do? And it didn't take until I was in my own addiction to understand that the disease of addiction is powerful. And it wasn't actually me. It was that she just could not stop using and she couldn't stop using for me.
Yeah. I mean, in my relationships when I've been an addict and it's like, I've been in relationships that are like, why can't you stop doing it? Aren't I enough? Aren't I enough to make you stop doing it? And it's kind of hard to be honest and say, no, nothing is. Absolutely nothing. And unfortunately, you're a part of everything and nothing can actually make me stop using. It's like, it's really a funny one, or certainly nothing of this world is capable of doing that. And it's kind of, that's the devastating thing about addiction is what it does to the people around you without you even knowing it. Because I guess, one day you do kind of wake up from that and look back and be like, oh my God, have I really done that?
Yeah.
Where did you find stability in your younger years?
Look, I think my sister played a huge part. There was a 10-year difference between us, and she lived with us until she was, I think I was 4 and she was 14 the day that she left. And she was my stability. She was my carer, the person that, loved me and tucked me into bed and held the household together, really. And she eventually just walked out when she was, I was 4 and she was 14. And after that, there was no stability. There was none, it was bouncing in and out of foster care for a long time. And that was supposed to be my stability, and that was supposed to be the people that cared for me. And unfortunately, that just wasn't my story. A lot goes on in the system that people aren't aware of. And unfortunately, that was my story.
So you had to grow up fast then. You had to practically start taking care of yourself. And did you find it hard to trust people?
Oh yeah, and when I was growing up, it was you say nothing, you hear nothing, and you trust no one. That was just how it was in the environment that me and my sister grew up in. It's hard because you don't trust people, but then on the other hand, I gave too much trust to certain people, if that makes sense. So yeah.
Do you think it could possibly have been that when you found someone you thought, look, this is going to be my security, this is going to be my safe place, you are going to be it this is going to be it. This is how I'm going to feel good and be secure. And then you put it all in on that person and put all your trust in that one person.
Yeah, definitely. Like because there was not a lot of neglect, just on every level, I seeked that approval and I seeked that love and I seeked the care from others. And I started that very young. And especially after my sister left, it was like, all right, now I've got nobody, and I had to grow up extremely fast. And the moment that she left, I had to start cooking for myself. I then became my mother's carer. I briefly remember being, not long after my sister had left and my mum had overdosed in our lounge room, and I had to call 000 to get help. And what 4-year-old knows how to do that, like,
it's not normal.
But I did, because that to me was the normal. I'd seen my sister, I'd witnessed my sister doing this on so many occasions that it was like, okay, Melanie's gone, now it's my time to step up. And I did. I managed to somehow look after myself under the radar for, I think it was about 12 months before I started school. And once I started school, then it was very obvious by, the neglect. Like, I was not showered. I smelt of urine. I was coming to school with no food. It was only then that child protection was contacted. And this happens to millions of children around the world, My story is really not that different to a lot of other people's stories. That is the reality of addiction, and that's why I talk about it today.
I've seen this happening. I've been around when I was using, and been around houses and kind of seen mothers doing that, and they're just, I was addicted to ketamine, and it's quite similar to heroin in a way. It still gets you real fucked up. You don't know what's going on, and just like, see a kid there, look at the mum, and the mum's just like, just like can't even talk, and it's just like, fuck, But at the same time, I understand why they just, they can't stop, and sometimes they're not aware in the way that they've been brought up and the conditions they've been brought up in. They've been raised in that environment, the same as in these, in the sort of conditions that you're raised in. That's normal, isn't it? It's not like no one's looking at you saying, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, because everyone else is doing the same thing. And yeah, oh man, that's it's tough, and it's good that you are talking about it. And it's talking about that stuff. I put myself in that position. I'd be like, could I do that? I don't know. It's hard, and it really is amazing to come forward and actually talk about that stuff. It's not. I mean, when did you start using yourself?
I started drinking at 12, but I think that I probably would have come across alcohol earlier than that, but not actually started drinking solidly. But I started, when I was 12 years old, I started drinking. And I found it very quickly I'd fallen in love. I think the first time I drank, I was in the city of Sydney. I was with a group of people, and we went back to somebody's apartment, and they had the tequila shots lined up, and I was intrigued. My brain lit up before I even had that shot. And when I did have that shot, it was like that instant relief that I had been looking for all my life. It was this amazing moment where everything was just washed away, all the fear, all the trauma, it was all just like washed away. So for me, alcohol was love at first sip,
Yeah.
And it worked. And I started to drink more and more and more. And by the time I got to 14, the alcohol wasn't working the way that I wanted it to. I was constantly chasing that first experience, which I never got, if I'm being honest. And then drugs came into the picture.
Yeah. Alcohol's I don't know what's worse in a way, being an alcoholic or a drug addict, obviously depending what you're doing. But, hangovers for me is still kind of like one of the worst things in the world. Just like, oh man, I don't miss having a hangover. I know that. So, one thing that I'm kind of, I'll skip back a little bit. So, you said that you kind of felt different to everybody else, and you got diagnosed with ADHD and PTSD. What processes did you? I mean, did you have any techniques that you kind of used to manage those at the time?
Look, my mum eventually got clean and sober, so I think how I got diagnosed with I got diagnosed with ADHD and post-traumatic stress disorder. There was also thought inklings that it may be bipolar disorder as well, and I think that my mum felt horrible, I guess, for the way that I was raised and what had happened, that she dived right in and wanted to kind of fix me. So we started seeing psychologists and psychiatrists and dietitians and any doctor we possibly could, because my behavior was spiking very quickly. I was aggressive. It was emotional, high, like depression. I can remember having depression, like, from really young, like 5, 6, like thinking of, I don't want to be here. It's really sad. So I think for me, it was very obvious growing up that something maybe just wasn't quite right. Like there was something really different about the way that I thought. Like I just could not communicate or connect with anyone on an emotional level, a healthy emotional level. My behavior was just getting so severe. Like my mum, ended up many times having to get the police involved because my anger was just so, I'd go into massive fits of rage where I just wouldn't even remember what had happened. So we started the diagnosis when she got clean, and very quickly I was diagnosed with ADHD and put into counselling, especially because I had by that point had I'd had a lot of sexual abuse through childhood in foster care as well. And so, my mum really wanted to kind of help me and save me before this got out of control. And so it was a long process. And I didn't actually get diagnosed with bipolar disorder until I was a lot older, in my late 20s, actually. So it'd been under the radar for quite a specific amount of time.
Yeah. What were the kind of... So I'll go back to the depression. So how old do you think you was when you kind of noticed that you had depression?
I would have to say probably 5 or 6.
That's crazy.
But when I talk to my mum today about it, she remembers me like actually writing suicide notes very young, probably even younger than that.
Younger than 5, writing suicide notes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that had a lot to do with, my environment. Like, I was born into something that I just shouldn't have been born, and I just never thought that, the view that I had on the world was really horrific to begin with, and as I grew, like I just got angrier and angrier with the world. I got angrier with the police. I got angrier, because I just could not understand. I was just invisible. That's how I felt. I just felt invisible to everybody. Like I had no voice. And what was happening to me, didn't matter to others. And the only way that I could see out was suicide. And I think I saw that from a very young age. There is no way out of this unless I end it all.
How did you keep going through that? How are you, how are you still here today?
To be honest, I have absolutely no idea. like to be able to come into recovery this time, to be able to be here today and living the life that I live. I would have to say the one thing, today I use all that stuff. I use my childhood and I use what I went through as my strength. If I could survive that, when I think about it, I think about like things that are going on for me today. I think, oh God, you got through that. You're going to get through this. And that is how I have continued to push through. My past is my motivation.
Yeah.
And it is the most powerful motivation that you can possibly have. And that's why I try to talk about it today, because, I thought that I was dealt this hand of cards and that I had to live with it, where really I didn't have to.
Yeah. And I think that it's quite a common theme in anyone who's suffered with addiction or anything, is to actually recognise it as a strength and have compassion for everybody else, in the sense like, I don't want anyone else to get qualified in this. Like, I don't want anyone else to have to get this qualification. It wasn't a lot of fun. And if I can use my qualification in this through experience to help other people not to go through that, it kind of provides the medicine that heals the wounds themselves, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Was there anything in particular that you did to kind of process and deal with the anger?
Well, I mean, today I'm part of a 12-step program, so that helps me a lot with, for me, I've learned that holding on to resentment and anger is really, at the end of the day, is just like drinking poison and expecting others to be poisoned.
Yeah.
It's not beneficial to anybody else, and the only person that it's hurting is me. So, there are a lot of things that I use today for my anger, because obviously I still have bipolar, and I still deal with mania, and I still deal with outbursts and anger, but I've had to look at my life and the way that I live, and that is my number one priority today. I have a daily program that I have to work, not just to stay clean and sober, but I have to work this for my spiritual condition as well, for my sanity. Because like I say it all the time, I don't need, drugs or alcohol to be insane. I can simply stop working my program, and like that I go insane, So for me, it is about looking after myself on every level, emotionally, physically, spiritually. And so for me, that looks like, I've had to make huge changes in my life. I was not a healthy person when I came into recovery. I was 109 kilos. I was overweight. I was eating, takeaway pretty much every day. I was using a lot of drugs, and I was drinking pretty much every day. And, I was killing myself slowly. There was no, I'd given up. I'd given up, and I thought, you know what, I don't even actually excuse my French, I don't actually give a fuck anymore. Yeah. I will do whatever I can to fill that void.
Yeah.
So, the way that I had to change was I had to look at my lifestyle and the way that I was living, and the way that I was eating played a huge part in it. I needed to start doing things such as gym. I needed to change my diet. I needed to attend 12-step program daily, sometimes even 2 times a day. I needed to connect with others who were going through the same journey as what I was going through. I needed to introduce meditation, prayer, and gratitude. Gratitude has been the biggest thing for me. Gratitude has changed my life, because I only could see everything in black and white. I was negative all the time. And what gratitude has done is it has opened up the ability to be grateful for everything that I have. But I also today use gratitude as a way of manifesting more abundance, and it has.
Gratitude is fantastic, because it's literally like you're carrying around a little doorway into happiness everywhere you go. It's like, oh, this is shit, this has happened. And then, but you can just be like, it's just a shift of mindset and perspective. Be like, oh yeah, but at least that's good. And then looking at, you know what I mean, choosing to see the good part rather than the bad. And yeah, I spoke about this, but one of my exes used to be, she was all about abundance and gratitude, and she's telling me all this stuff, and I was always, you know, like, I had a pretty big void, and I was always kind of chasing something to make me happy, and she's just telling me to be grateful, and it used to piss me off hearing it. It used to be so annoying. She'd just be like, oh, just be grateful of this, and I'd just be like, fuck off. You know what I mean? Like, I just couldn't deal with it, and I felt like it was condescending and patronising, and I just didn't get it until I got it, and then I was just like, oh yeah, this is ace. This works. Oh man, yeah. What? So your daily program. So there's exercise, diet, and just all those kind of really simple things. Is there any other kind of daily processes you have to do when you attend a 12-step meeting? What sort of things go on there?
Yeah, so as a requirement of the 12-step program, look, I can just go to the 12-step program and I can do meetings, but what I have found is my story is, you know, I've had a sufficient amount of relapses. In fact, I had 14 relapses to get to this recovery. And I always believed that I could just go to a 12-step program and do, say, like a meeting or two a day, and that would be enough. And it didn't work for me. So when I came into recovery this time, thankfully, I was desperate enough to go to any lengths, and that's what I needed. I needed to fully surrender, not just to the program, but I needed to fully surrender to everything in my life. And so for me, you know, it was a process of not just coming into recovery once again and doing one or two meetings. I needed to do everything that was suggested to me, and that looked like getting a sponsor, which was really, really hard for me because, you know, I struggle with relationships. You know, I struggled with relationships, and I had lived so long on my own will, doing whatever I wanted to do. It was really hard for me to, you know, invite somebody into my life who was going to direct me on how to live my life. You know, like I really believed that if anything was going to get done, if I was going to get better, it was going to happen because of me. And that was because, you know, that is how I'd grown up. You know, it was just me. That was it. And I only could depend 100% on myself. So when I came into recovery, I had to let that go, and I had to invite a sponsor into my life who goes through the steps with me. So there is 12 steps in a 12-step program. I'm sure, you know, a lot of people who are listening to this understand. And I needed to work the program to the best of my ability, and I need to do that daily in all my affairs. So every area of my life, like I can go to meetings and I can work a 12-step, I can work a 12-step program. I can work the 12 steps, but then I can go out into the world and I can still do shitty ass behavior. You know, I can go out and be an absolute bitch. And then what happens is I end up in pain on every level. And the end result for me, which is what it always has been, is that eventually I will pick up a drink or a drug or anything. You know, today I identify as I'm an addict of all things. Yeah. Because it's not just drugs, it's not just alcohol, it can be sex and love, it can be gym addiction, it can be shopping addiction, it can be nicotine addiction, it can be, you know, codependency. You know, when it makes me feel good, I'm going to want more. Yeah. And there's no off switch. And I guess going to a 12-step program, and I've done other things for my recovery as well, but the 12-step program for me taught me about the disease of addiction. It made sense to me where I could understand, of course, I have a void and my natural instinct is to fill it. And I will continue to fill it until I hand over the power. Admit that I'm powerless over this. I have no control over this addiction, any of them. I never did, and I never will. And that has helped me to come to that acceptance, has helped me to stay clean and sober once again for a substantial amount of time. I'll be 2 next month, actually. I'll be 2 years clean and sober next month.
Well done. And it's a big deal. I don't even dare count. You know what I mean? I don't even count because I just don't. It just creates these kind of like structural reward type things in my head, and I just don't even want to buzz off it. I don't want anything to do with it. I'm just like, I don't know. It's over a year since I've done anything, and it's just like, yeah, I don't know. Just leave it at that. I've just decided to choose life instead of death. Do you know what I mean? I'm just choosing light instead of darkness, and that's kind of as much as I'm prepared to think about that. But yeah, there's a couple of things that, like, with getting better, that I found it's like, you've got to want it for a start. You've actually got to want to be sober, which took me, was like the most frustrating thing for me was like, I really like drugs. You know what I mean? I really like it, and for some reason, I just didn't get depressed enough. Everyone else was just getting depressed and falling around me, and I was doing drugs, and everyone's just like, why are you never depressed? You're a drug addict. I was like, I don't know. I like it. So for me, like, and I had this like eject button. Every time it got too bad, I'd just press eject and I'd leave, and I'd go somewhere else, and I'd get away from it. And I'd get away just enough and be like, oh, I wanted to do it again. I went back and it was like, oh, good. It was kind of good again. It's like the first hit because I was just coming back into something, see your mates, doing the drugs again. And I just kept doing that, and I was back and forth for years. So it was almost, I can't even call it a relapse because I just never made the decision to quit. And that's what pissed me off. I was just like, I knew that this was taking my entire life and that I was wasting everything that I could be by wasting my time doing this. I was just like, how the hell do you make yourself want to quit? And it took me 6 years of practically being off drugs to make myself be like, right, I don't want to do that anymore. Because I just kept going back and doing it. I lived in Melbourne at one point. I lived all around Australia, New Zealand, and like stayed away for 7 years since I've been away practically now. And every time I'd go back, even on holiday, I would just fucking hit it so hard. I'd land, my mum and dad would be like, I miss you so much. And then within a week, they'd just be like, just go away, just leave again. You're shit, you know what I mean? Like, it'd just be like what? And I was just like, I can't keep doing this, you know what I mean? Like my parents that liked me more away, and then when I went back, it was just like, what's this all about? And like, same story with so many people. It's hard to kind of actually kick it while you're in the environment, and the only thing that made me want to actually stop was because I realised that I could help other people. And then it was like, it doesn't feel, I've not quit for me. If I never started this thing I was doing, I wouldn't have quit. I know I wouldn't. I don't know, same with you with Change to Surrender. You know, it helps you, doesn't it, to actually, gives you a reason beyond yourself to actually do it, and provides you with connection and, like, you know, like this, meeting you and all these. I love doing these podcasts. It's great. The amount of people I get to meet through us, it's such a wonderful thing. And I think that's one of the things with actually doing a program or starting something is it feels like you've stepped into a new world where there's actually people that you can relate to and they get it and they're sober. And it's really unusual to be like, I can relate to these people because, like, you know, when someone's never been an addict, they just don't get it. It's like, oh, you should just stop. And then they kind of, there's a lot of arrogance and a lot of judgment from people who were like, you know, like they think that because you was an addict, you're kind of like scum or whatever. But then it's like all these successful people who are used to be addicts, who are sober, and you're like, there's kind of like a real strong connection with those people.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, like when I came into recovery, everybody comes to recovery for different reasons. For me, I had to lose everything. And so I did. I had the typical story. I lost my husband. I'd lost, 5 of my children. I had lost my family. I'd lost everything. So I was at complete rock bottom this time. I walked into recovery homeless. I still actually had 2 children. I had two of my little ones. And I was struggling to look after them. I had child protection on my ass. I had nothing when I walked into recovery. And so to walk into a program, which, I was already familiar with, but to walk into a different fellowship in a different area and be open, welcomed with open arms again, despite what I had done, what I had lost, what my history was just what saved me. They loved me back to life. How I started at Change to Surrender was actually started as a small Facebook page for my local 12-step fellowship, just for a place for me to share my trauma, I guess, my trauma, my story. I felt like I had been silenced my whole life, and I needed a place to openly talk about the stuff that I necessarily maybe couldn't talk about in a 12-step meeting, because, it might be triggering for other people. But we're on a Facebook page, people, if they, I'd put a trigger warning so they knew that if they have some history, they didn't need to read it. But, it started very small. It wasn't about anything other than me having a place to be able to feel like I was releasing things, having that voice. And so, like when I started the page, it actually only, I had to beg, my friends just to follow the page, and they were like, oh, we don't want to follow it. And I'm like, just follow it, please, And so it started really small. And within a couple of months, actually a couple of weeks, it had grown to 900 followers on Facebook. And then I thought, this is something that I could use to help other people. Like I had no idea how I even made it back into recovery this time. I had a series of events in my last relapse where, I'd had car accidents, I had a stroke, like you just, to be able to survive that lifestyle is just a miracle. But when I walked into recovery this time, I thought, I'm obviously here for a reason, and maybe this is my purpose. Maybe it is for me to be able to share my story with others so that they don't feel alone, because I did. I felt like I was the only person who grew up in that lifestyle. I felt that I was the only, child that had been abused at like not even 2. The first time I was abused, I wasn't even 2. I felt that I was alone in every area of my life. And what I found was very quickly when I started the Instagram account at Change to Surrender, it became very clear to me very quickly that this was something bigger.
Yeah.
That there are millions of people out there who have experienced exactly the same story as I have. And I thought, this is not good. And if we can all start to talk about it, start to break the stigma, all the stigmas, because there's many, that we may be able to create a safe environment for people to be able to connect with others and to be able to have a voice for the first time in their life. And as I talk about that now, it's really moving to me, because I set out to do that, and I have. And now we have this beautiful community of thousands around the world who are not only, talking about their recovery journey, but are also talking about their mental health, that are talking about their childhood abuse. They're talking about the things that they have survived. They are talking about how they are defeating the odds. And because they talk about it, just because I started talking about it, other people started talking about it, and it's a domino effect. And the more that we talk about it, the more others talk about it. And I get to do, amazing interviews like this with yourself, where I get to come on and say, you're not alone.
It's amazing. I mean, I've had exactly the same experience when I shared my first post, and there's a lot of fear around sharing your first post. You think everyone's just going to give you loads of shit, tell you to shut the fuck up, like you attention-seeking prick, like why are you putting all this stuff out there? And the response that I had to really, really push through to put my first post out. I didn't want to really share that, not really, but it just, some deep down it had to be done. I knew it. I don't know why I knew it, but I just knew that I have to do this. I was thinking about it for years before I actually did it, and the response that I got to it, and the connection that I got through it, for people being like, yes, that is exactly my life. You've just described my life as well, and it was just like this thing and this feeling that I got. Was like I've never felt it before, in the sense I've never felt like I was doing the right thing so much in my life. And it took me quite a bit after that to really catch on to the fact that it's kind of like it's changed to surrender, in the sense that I had to rewire my, desires to be like, you need to bin everything that you think that you want in your life and accept and surrender to the fact that you are a servant of this cause, which has been a really slow and painful and frustrating process. To be like, what do you mean I can't just follow all my self-centered dreams and go snowboarding and all these things that you want? What do you mean I've got and then but slowly as these things melt away, it's just like, it becomes quite peaceful. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're like, I don't need to do anything. I don't actually need to do these things that are motivating me. Like I don't need these motives to get money to do this and fulfill. You know what I mean? I've just got to wake up every day and do my best to help people do stuff. It's actually kind of freeing in a sense. But I remember that transition. There was like 12 months where I was kind of like hanging on to the old stuff so much, and it was taking all my energy, and I had such bad anxiety and stuff, holding on to the past, I didn't want to surrender. I was fighting. I was still fighting for it, and when I finally let go of that thing, it's amazing how the things that you're so attached to that you think are your life and are everything are actually nothing. Do you know what I mean? Like, all these things that you've been clinging on to, like, this is everything to me. This means the world. And then what would I do if I didn't have this? And then you let go of it. It was like, actually what's actually come into my life is better than that could ever have been. It's really, really strange process, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I think, I can so relate to you on that, because, I had a period of time, actually, when I just started the Instagram account, where I was doing my research, and I was looking at other Instagram accounts, and I was looking at all these influencers, and I was really lost. It was kind of like, okay, so my Instagram account, I need to promote all of this shit, and I need to, I need to gain money from what I'm doing. This is going to be my career. And I got to a point where I just felt so empty, so disconnected, and so lost. And this thing that I had grown, that was this beautiful thing that gave me gratitude, just disappeared. And I realized what was actually the beautiful thing about it was that I wasn't gaining anything. I was just simply giving back what was given to me. And yes, I could go, and the kind of thinking that I was having was that, yes, I could go and work a full-time job, 9 to 5 in an office somewhere. I could go, work in retail or something, and I could, make money. Money doesn't actually make me happy. It certainly didn't make me as happy as I was when I was talking to other people in recovery. The feedback that I was getting from people, meeting new connections like you, like talking to sober girls, like sober sisters and stuff. Like, it was just, it had opened up a world that just gave me so much gratitude.
Yeah.
It given me purpose. And purpose today to me means more than money. I work this page. There's only 2 of us that work on this page, so it's myself and my manager Jenna, and 99% of the work that we do is non-profit. So what we do on the Instagram page is I work from about 8 a.m. in the morning till sometimes 10, 11 o'clock at night, talking to other people who are in recovery, sharing other people's stories, Sometimes we'll go into rehab centers and detox clinics, and I'll share my journey with others. And it has given me purpose today. And we're helping others, and others are helping others. And that's something that I can do, free of charge. Others did it for me, and today that is my purpose, to be able to give back what was given to me. So, yeah, I did definitely struggled for a little bit, where I was like, okay, society have this huge expectation on me going onto an Instagram account that I have to promote. It's like, well, yeah, I can still promote, which is what I do today. I promote recovery, I promote change.
Yeah. I can relate to me. So I haven't worked for about 15 months, and I've just been doing this. And there's been no income. Absolutely nothing. And I've just been muddling by. I did set up like an Amazon business selling these little signs, and it's brought in just enough money to kind of just about scrape by for about a year. But it's another thing that you have to surrender to, isn't it? It's like, I have accepted the fact that I'm poor and that if I have no money, that's okay. And having faith that at some point it will come. And when it does come, the fact that I didn't expect it makes me open to the most amount of gratitude, and, to be absolutely frank, faith in something, the powers that be, taking absolutely wonderful care of me, because at no point have I not had what I needed. I didn't have what I wanted, but I had what I needed always. Like, every base was always covered. And finally, after 2 years, something's happening now, and things are taking off. There's some real energy around this thing, and like, everybody's kind of just been like, how can I help now? But you have to go through the fear and the uncomfortable parts and all that. You really have to struggle through. And what's nice about that struggle, of life, is like, the harder it was, the more you get to inspire people. When it's been really, really tough, you do get to be like, that was what I did. And they're like, oh. And anybody who knows how much of a ket addict I was, and the fact that if I can, I'm not doing it anymore, and I'm actually saying, like, I've quit. I'm finally saying I've quit. I'm not doing it ever again. But for people to be like, oh, mate, James was a right kethead, and now he's not. He's like, well, if he can do it, I definitely can. Because, like, I didn't stop using at all for 10 years. I didn't stop, not at all. Woke up, I had to have a line before I got out of bed. Couldn't get out of bed without a line. I remember once I set a challenge. I was like, right, your challenge is to eat your breakfast before you have a line. Please. Like, please, just eat your breakfast first, right? Because you fuck your stomach up if you get it in your stomach before food. It's just had a rotten day. And, that was hard. I couldn't really do it. I did it for a bit, but generally, no, I had to have a line before I got out of bed. And that's just oh man. Yeah, it's not a good life. But one of the things that you said was that, everybody watching this probably knows what a 12-step program is. They don't. They don't. And that's why we're doing it, because people don't know, and drug addicts don't look into recovery. They don't bother. And you kind of don't even want to know, really. And you think that the answer's just stop, and the answer's not just stop, and because just stop is being in control. And it's like you said about, and I love that change to surrender is just that it says it all. You have to change to accepting that you can surrender, and it does require having some faith, that it will be okay if you stop trying to control it, which is really counterintuitive. And that's why I think that it's so important to do this, to let people know. It's like, there kind of is two ways of stopping. It is either just stop, which is basically, for me, impossible, and for most people, impossible, unless you replace it with something else to fill the void, which is just another one of these things that you're talking about, like codependency or having a relationship, but that's going to probably be quite destructive and not that fun, I wouldn't have thought. Or like I say, just completely surrendering to the fact that you accept and admit that you can't control it, which is just doesn't make sense, does it? It just doesn't make sense that would work, but it does. Which is one of the reasons why I think it's important that people do be like, if you are an addict, just actually look into a 12-step process, because you'll be surprised what it actually is and what the steps are, and the fact that by following it, it can work without as much effort as you think as well. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it works if you work it, you know, and I was always like so resistant to work the program, because I thought, oh, it's going to be like university or something. I'm going to, like it's going to have to go, it's going to take a lot of time. And it does. It takes a lot of time. But I was overcomplicating a simple program.
Yeah.
And today it is. It's really simple. And I keep it simple because I can overcomplicate it very easily. But, I was lucky enough that I came to the 12-step program because my mum was actually a member of the 12-step program. That's how she got clean. So that's how I knew about the 12-step program. But you're completely right. A lot of people don't know about the 12-step program. And though we do have some celebrities who do talk about it, I'd love to see more people talking about it, because the 12-step program has not only saved my life, but it's saved millions of lives around the world, and I think the more that we talk about it, the more that people can relate and know of a place to get help. You're right. A lot of people aren't as lucky as I was. I was lucky that I knew of the 12-step program, but a lot of others don't. And so I feel like, I try to make it very obvious in my work that I got clean and sober because I attended the 12-step program. And I do have a lot of people asking me about the 12-step program, and I feel like it is my purpose to tell people, give internet connections or Zoom, links to meetings, because it does work if you work it.
What's the requirements to attend a 12-step program? Do you have to walk through that door clean?
Nope.
You can walk in.
The only desire you need for a 12-step program is the desire to be clean and sober.
But you can walk in there fucked, basically.
Well, I want to point this out because there was a lot of times I came to the 12-step program in 2009. I got clean and sober this time in 2008. And there was a lot of times that I attended 12-step meetings, whether it's AA or NA or other 12-step meetings, where I was under the influence. In fact, I've gone to meetings where I've been so off my face that I've thrown chairs at people. Like that's the reality, because I did in that period of time. I had nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
I was frightened, and I knew that if I kept coming back, no matter what, whether I was high, whether I was drunk, that somebody would be there. And I guess I kept it my safe place for a long time. And even though, I had been quite I distracted meetings many, many times. Not once was I ever told to go away.
Amazing.
Not once was I ever said, you can't come in here. The only requirement is the desire to stop using and drinking.
Yeah. That's amazing as well, because it's kind of just like, it's just actually getting a taste of what love is. The fact that you can be fucked up and a mess, and that people do still love you, and that you can't really do anything wrong. And for a lot of people that think that they're kind of like not worthy of love, to go to a place where people are just like, it doesn't matter what you do, it's okay. This is the hospital. These people, everybody in a 12-step program or in recovery isn't fixed. No one's completely better. It's a hospital, isn't it? And you know what I mean. If you're sick, you need to go to the hospital. And you know what I mean. You don't have to be better, because there's doctors there and they're going to help you, and there's other patients, and everyone can kind of like get friends, be friends, and You know, I've never actually done it, and I think that it would be a really good thing to start doing. I mean, what I do is the same. You know, my spiritual practice is the same as this, but like just actually going to where everybody's addicts, and I think it would be a really nice thing to actually for me to start learning more about, which I am through these podcasts, and I'm so grateful for it, and for people like you coming on. It's amazing. There's one more thing that I would like to talk about, because I have a lot of friends in this industry, and it's not a very peaceful. It doesn't appear to me to be a very peaceful environment, and it seems very destructive. But in the world of, you know, like in strip clubs and stuff, which you've said you've worked in strip clubs and stuff. What was your kind of experience of those places?
Look, I think it's important to say that, you know, I not just worked in the stripping industry, I worked in the adult industry. So I started in stripping, and eventually I went to escorting, because that was kind of my rock bottom, I guess. And I think it's really important to say that everybody who works in this industry has a different experience. Some have a positive experience and some have a negative. And one of the things that, you know, I think society is that people go into this industry because they're junkies or they're drug addicts, and that's not actually the case. Like, yes, I was using drugs when I was working, but a lot of the women that I worked with were normal women. You know, I worked with a police officer that had worked as a police officer through the day, through the night, she stripped. So what my experience of the industry was that I started because obviously of the money. The money is good. And to be honest, like, I actually was very lucky that I worked in clubs when I was stripping. I worked in clubs where the girls were quite supportive. Now, don't get me wrong, it was very competitive, and there were some girls in there that were quite nasty, but I also had girls around me that knew that I could see that I had, you know, much more going on, and would sit with me, actually took the time to listen to me. So I think that we had this connection in some way. But yes, and that's not to say that all my experiences have been good. You know, I worked in strip clubs, and I also worked through agency work as well, and that is a completely different story. When working in clubs, you're in a relatively safe environment. It's not to say that every club is like that, but majority of the strip clubs that I worked in were safe. They had security. They had surveillance. It did get harassed, but usually it was taken care of by security, and I was not really at a huge amount of risk. But then I went into stripping in agency work, and that was a completely different story. Yes, I didn't have security with me a lot of the time. So I'd be walking into a club or, you know, a brothel, or I'd be walking into a house party where I had absolutely no idea what to expect. And a lot of the time I'd been touched when I shouldn't have been touched. I'd been bailed up in houses. I'd not been paid. And those experiences still to this day haunt me. But I want to make that clear that not every woman's experience in the industry is the same.
No, I've met some really kind of professional examples of people in that industry, and you know, some of my friends put themselves in situations, and I've just been like, just so worried. And I mean, it does seem like the drug use in them industries is heavy. It is really heavy, and it does seem like quite a common denominator. Although, as you say, not every time. You know, I'm just trying to, because I know so many people who have been in that world, and I feel like it would be really good to kind of pull some value out of that for someone that's kind of been through it and stopped, and what you would kind of say to someone in that industry who isn't having a good time of it.
I guess, like if you are in that industry and you're not having a good time, get out. And to say that it's not always that easy. I understand that as well because, I had been in the industry for quite a substantial amount of time and there were points where I wasn't happy and I wanted to sort of get clean and live a normal life, and leaving wasn't that easy because I now had my only financial income was this money. So I feel like we have a lot of support in this country, in Australia, which is fantastic. We do have benefits and that kind of stuff. But I think if you're not happy in your work environment, that has something to say.
Yeah. I compare it so much to when I was selling drugs, in the sense that it's like you're getting an unusual amount of money for what you're doing. Some people, it's just an obscene amount of money. And then there was a time when I knew I had to stop selling drugs. I knew that if I got caught again, I was going to prison for a long time. And it's just like, I have to stop doing this. And then I was just like, the actual decision to finally stop doing it, because it was great, loads of money, people, like, everyone, it was kind of like lots of attention, bad attention though, and bad money, to be honest. And it's like, to make that decision to finally be like, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm choosing to live a kind of a healthier life. One of the things that when you're in that industry is you're surrounded by the people that are there. I can't imagine they're seeing you as a person. They're just looking at you objectively. And it's just fueled by lust and desire, dangerous desires often, I'm sure, and it's just kind of a scary and unhealthy world from my perspective. I just wanted to kind of bring that up because I don't often get the chance to, and I think that's interesting to talk about it. And I think, a lot of people have a lot of judgment of people working in that world and stuff, but I just don't see it as being any different to me selling drugs, really.
No, not at all. They're both very similar, as you said, and I can so relate to that because my income, give or take, was around, I think it was about $7,000 a week cash. That is a substantial amount of money.
It's crazy.
So leaving the industry was hard for me because I then had this grief. And it's the catch-22, I'm no longer in this industry. I haven't been in this industry for a long time. But there are times where I have been so broke where I've gone, maybe I could. But I couldn't. I know I couldn't and I won't. But it is another addiction in another way. Money for me is another addiction.
Yeah. I remember there was a time and I was like, because when I was still an addict, I guess I was 23 or something. It was probably just before. Or maybe I was actually, I had a little relapse around 25. Maybe it was then. I can't remember. But I remember I was just like, I was so desperate for money. And I was so in debt, and I was actually happier as an addict in debt and hardly being able to get anything than I was when I was selling it. Because when I was selling it, it was just like unregulated sense that, there was just no end to it, and it was like, I knew it was going to self-destruct what I was doing. I was going to self-destruct, so I was happier to be healthier, even though I had no money. But then I was like so messed up, I was like, man, I have to do something to get money fast. Like, I need to. I've got no choice. And in my head, that was it. Like, I have no choice. I rang up a dealer, and I started driving there. It was a 45-minute drive, and I drove nearly all the way there. And I just knew. I knew it was the wrong thing. I was like, if you do this, this is bad. This is bad. You've promised yourself you'll never do this again. You've promised, I promised my partner I will never do this again. I don't want to do this to you or anyone else or me. I've already got caught, already made my mum depressed from I nearly went to prison when I was 18. I've already put my family through it. Like, you can't do this. And I stopped the car and I pulled over and I just sat there for hours, just sat there just like, and then until I finally made a decision, just like, I'm not doing it. And I just rang up, I was like, sorry, I don't want it. and drove home again. And I'd already convinced myself in my head, like, you need to do this. You need the money. You have no choice. But I didn't, and I didn't need to do it. And it is, and you know, and then I surrendered in a way, and there was another way.
Yeah.
And I think that that's always the case if you make the right decision, which isn't easy. It's not easy to make that decision, is it? Because it seems in the moment like there's no choice, but there is.
Yeah. If I've learned anything in this recovery is that there is a choice. You know, I can choose to go back to that industry, but I can't guarantee where it will lead me. Like I can't say that I wouldn't go back to that industry and start using and drinking again. And to be honest, I'm not even sure if I could do it, to be honest. Like I'm actually have discovered that I'm quite a shy person, where back in those days I was so, you know, high majority of the time that it was nothing really to me. But, you know, I've had so many times in this recovery where I've been at my lowest rock bottom financially, or I've gone, maybe I'm going to have to go back, and I've made that decision not to because my recovery today is more important for me. And what happens? I don't know how it happens, but I have always been taken care of. You know, not once have I ever been, you know, like completely fucked. Like I have always been looked after in this recovery. But yeah, for me, that industry, if I could say what that industry was like for me, that industry for me was, it wasn't all bad, but it wasn't all good. And in the end, I was living such a life that was full of masks. It was so full of fantasy that I had completely lost myself, and I had no idea what was reality and what was fake.
Yeah.
I had built my life in a fantasy. I had become the dancer. You know, I was using my stage name, not just at work, but I had taken my work outside of work back home, and I had taken it into my life. And I, you know, didn't really have an idea of who I was back then, but I knew that I didn't want to live as that character that I had become.
Yeah. That seems like something that now you say that and you've said it, and I'm just like, you know, that's so true of everybody who I know is like, they really like this other identity. Like they really, really enjoy using this other identity. And I think they like it more than themselves. Yeah. I think learning about...
I mean,
yeah.
You know, like when you walk into that club, like just to paint a picture of what it's like to work, when I get on that stage, I'm not Zowie anymore. You know, I'm this other person, and I have this freedom to be whoever I want to be. I mean, I think a lot of people in life would love to be able to do that, just check out of life and be, you know, this person that they have always wanted to be for like an hour or whatever. And that's what it was like, and it's addictive.
Yeah, I can see that, because there's something really powerful about being able to stand naked in front of people and not giving a shit. There's something, when in a world of where, you know, I couldn't do that. I couldn't. I know I couldn't. Like, having a sauna with a load of blokes completely naked, I find that really uncomfortable. Just, like, really uncomfortable. I'm not all right with that. And that bothers me. Because some blokey blokes, manly blokes, they're really, you know, that's no bother to them. But I'm just like, yeah, I'm kind of not comfortable. You know what I mean? And there's something really, empowering about doing it. So even just doing it, it's just kind of like, for someone who has insecurities, it's just like, fuck yeah, look at me go, you know?
Yeah. Look, you can either do it or you can't. And that is something that I would say to all the new girls. You won't know until you're thrown into the deep end. And that's what happened for me when I started. You know, there was like, I came in to do an interview. They said, you can work, let's get you in. And they threw me on stage. And usually you wouldn't be required to take off your clothes that first time on stage. But what happened was I had a client who threw me money. So it was kind of like, okay, this is what I'm doing now. So that first time, you know, I would strip down completely naked in front of hundreds of people. And I became addicted in that moment. Because, and I do take it back to childhood stuff, because for the first time I'd been seen, and it was all about me, and the attention was all on me, and I had the control this time. And in the past I hadn't had the control. When it came to men, I didn't have the control. I was always sort of the victim. And in this scenario, in this environment, I had, a lot of the time, majority of the time, I had the control over what that person was doing. So it was really empowering, and it made me really strong. And it kind of, it's interesting to talk about it, because I've never actually really spoken about it, but I still use a lot of the things that I used today, like in my work that I use, obviously I'm not running around, stripping on camera in podcasts, but it taught me a lot about business. It definitely taught, a majority of my clients were businessmen. I learned a lot about business.
It's totally the same as drug dealing. I swear, stripping and drug dealing. No, if you're a drug dealer and you judge a stripper, you're still selling yourself. It's it really is the same. I mean, you're potentially selling your freedom and serving life in prison, so you can just have I totally relate to the power of selling drugs, the popularity, the kind of the illusion of the freedom it gives you, and this fake identity as this person, and it was such a blessing to get caught selling drugs, because I thought I was the man. I thought I had all these friends, and then you get caught. You sat there on your birthday with your family, and they're looking at you like you're an absolute dick, and all your mates just don't want to call you up anymore. No one's calling you up anymore. You've only got a few friends now, and it's like, oh, they didn't really want me, did they? They just wanted my drugs. Oh man. Yeah, it's so similar. Fascinating as well. Because I don't know if... It definitely serves its purpose as a vehicle to learn some stuff. To really learn. Yeah, it served its purpose, but I wouldn't recommend it, either of those things, if you don't have to. They're definitely submerged in the darkness. It's not a healthy environment. I don't think so, personally. I don't think they're healthy environments if you want to be happy. I think it's a very hard place to be happy, because I think you've kind of got to be yourself. You have to take them masks off, don't you? And you can't really do it in those environments. I mean, drugs itself is a mask, isn't it?
I guess, the way I see stripping and how I, talk to people about it today is that it is a short-term fix.
Yeah. That
is it. It's not a lifestyle. It's not a long-term thing that you can do. I would say to anybody who's even contemplating going into the industry, you need to be in the right head frame. And I feel like to do it successfully, and it is possible to do successfully. There are many women that I worked with that, had really made themselves independent, strong women, business women. But to be able to do that, I feel like you need to have healed whatever trauma you've had, whatever past you've had, and you need to be strong and independent, be able to take the daily criticism, because there is a lot of criticism. You really need to be a strong, independent woman and feel comfortable with yourself on every level.
Do you think that, you can kind of be happy and fulfilled, like really happy, sustainably for a long time doing that?
I think it comes with a price tag. Yeah, I definitely think it does. Yes, I feel like If money is your goal, yes. If money makes you happy, yes, because the money is amazing, yes. So that will keep you happy. But I think on a lifestyle and relationship level, no.
Mm.
You know, I was not able to sustain a relationship with anybody when I was in that industry because it's very hard for someone else to be able to accept the work that you're doing, for starters, the amount of hours you're working. I was working 7 nights a week, 12 to 13-hour shifts. There was really no life. There was no life other than work.
From experience, it's kind of really hard to completely trust and accept that someone that you love is doing that and seeing it as something that I feel like I always, I don't know if this is, I'll be honest, I always felt like they were better than that. Do you know what I mean? I because I always felt like I saw what they were capable of doing and felt like I can see you and I see your talents and your personality shining through this mask that you've got on, and it's amazing and wonderful, and like I think that you could do something so wonderful and amazing in the world, and I think that this isn't what you're supposed to be doing, and that was always the kind of and I guess I was controlling in the sense that I would always encourage them to get out of that world, which I don't know if that's the right or wrong thing to do. I was kind of like a drug addict at the time, so I was probably massively hypocritical. Like I was so hypocritical at the time, you know, but I didn't know any better. I felt like I was doing the right thing. And actually, that backfired on me because when they got into other work, they couldn't handle normal work.
Yeah.
They could handle dancing in that environment, but when they got put into the normal world, it just couldn't. So I think that I was wrong for that. I think if you want to choose to go out with someone like that, you got to let them. You know.
Yeah, I think that the way that you see it is a very common thing for men who have partners or girlfriends. Sorry, my camera's just gone off. Think this, you can do better, but it's not easy work. A lot of people think that, stripping is that you just walk around and look pretty and then you throw in some money and you take your clothes off. It is actually not that at all. It is long hours, wearing heels that are like this high, climbing a pole, talking business, sometimes even talking different languages to other clients. It is, emotionally draining, physically draining on every level. And to say that she could do better, well, maybe she's proud of what she's doing. I was not ashamed to tell people that I was a dancer because I worked really hard. And I did. I supported myself.
It does. It's definitely not an easy job. I mean, all you have to do is do telesales for a week, and you'll understand that trying to sell something, you know what I mean, like that, and the emotional thing, and having to put all that effort into that thing is hard, man. It is hard. So I have a massive amount of respect for it. And I've definitely seen fault in myself in those things as well. Well, it's really, really cool to talk about that stuff. We've done nearly an hour and a half, so I think we'll stop it there. It's been super, super interesting conversation, and thank you so much for coming on today. Where can people find you on social media?
So you can just head on to Instagram, and we're at Change to Surrender, and you can also find us on TikTok now at Change to Surrender. And
your website is the same, isn't it?
Yeah, so if you just link on, we do have a blog on our Instagram as well, where you can read other people's transformation stories and stories of recovery, strength and hope.
Yeah, there's a few stories on there, and yours is on there as well, and it's really interesting to actually read through your detailed story as well. And it blew me. I was when I read it, I was just like, oh my God. It's worth hopping on there and checking out everything that you do. So, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.